The paper felt cool and smooth beneath her fingertips, a pale lavender square waiting to be transformed. Each fold was deliberate, a gentle crease marking the beginning of wings that would never truly fly, yet carry dreams nonetheless. Dust motes danced in the late afternoon light, slanting through the window, illuminating the slow rhythm of her hands. A small ceramic bowl held a growing pile of finished cranes, their delicate forms clustered like resting birds. The lavender paper seemed to absorb the fading warmth of the sun, holding it within its folded layers. Outside, the distant chime of a boy echoed softly, a peaceful counterpoint to the quiet work inside. She continued folding, each crane a silent offering to the breeze, a wish released without expectation. The shadows lengthened across the floor, deepening the hues of purple and gray in the room as twilight approached. A single fish leaped in the garden pond, its silver scales flashing briefly before disappearing beneath the lily pads. With each completed crane, the pile grew a little taller, a quiet monument to hopes carried on the evening air. The lavender scent, faint but persistent, seemed to weave itself into the lengthening shadows now pooling around the edges of the room. Dust motes danced in the last golden rays filtering through the window, illuminated like tiny stars before fading with the light. She folded another crane, her hands moving with a practiced grace that needed no thought, only rhythm. Outside, the boy chimed again, its sound less distinct now, blending into the soft murmur of approaching night. The pile of cranes had begun to resemble a small hillock, a gentle rise in the quiet space, catching the dim light. A firefly blinked tentatively near the pond, a single spark against the deepening blue of the twilight sky. Another fish stirred beneath the lily pads, creating ripples that disturbed the reflections of the darkening trees. The shadows continued their slow creep across the floorboards, transforming familiar shapes into softer, more ambiguous forms. Each fold was an echo of the last, a repetition that felt less like work and more like a quiet meditation. The air grew cooler with each passing moment, carrying the promise of stillness and rest as the evening deepened. The pile of paper cranes grew slowly, a soft white mound against the dark wood of the floor. Dust motes danced in the last slivers of light filtering through the window, illuminated like tiny stars before fading into shadow. A woman continued to sweep the porch outside, the gentle rasp of bristles barely audible over the chirping of crickets. The pond's surface mirrored not just trees now, but also the first faint glimmer of distant starlight. Another crane joined the others, its delicate wings folded in peaceful repose. The shadows lengthened, blurring the edges of furniture and softening the angles of the room into gentle curves. A fish leaped from the water, a fleeting silver arc against the deepening indigo, then disappeared with barely a splash. The air held the scent of damp earth and night-blooming jasmine, carried on a cool breeze. Each fold of paper felt less like creation and more like an offering to the quiet stillness that was settling over everything. A single lantern glowed in the distance, a warm amber point in the vastness of the approaching night, unwavering and calm. The indigo deepened to a shade of twilight that felt almost tangible, like velvet draped across the world outside. More paper cranes joined their silent company, each one a delicate echo of the last, resting on the growing pile. Dust motes danced in the lantern light, slow spirals tracing patterns only visible at the periphery of vision. The scent of jasmine grew stronger with the coolness, weaving itself into the fabric of the shadows. A distant chime, perhaps from a temple bell, resonated softly, a single clear note that dissolved into the night air. The hand continued its rhythm, folding and creasing, not with purpose but with a gentle surrender to the quiet hours. Each completed crane seemed to absorb a little more of the fading light, holding it within their paper forms. Outside, the leaves rustled almost imperceptibly, a whisper against the deeper silence. The amber glow of the distant lantern remained steadfast, a small beacon in the vast expanse of darkness. A feeling of weightlessness settled over everything, as if the room itself were breathing with the slow rhythm of the night. The scent of dry paper mingled with the cool fragrance drifting from a bowl of night-blooming jasmine placed near the open window. Dust motes danced in the last slivers of light, illuminated like tiny stars before dissolving into shadow. Another crane joined its brethren, resting silently on the low table, wings slightly curved as if poised for flight, but remaining still. The hand moved with an unhurried grace, each fold a quiet echo of the ones before it, smoothing out any imperfection without effort. A distant chime, perhaps from a temple bell, resonated softly through the stillness, barely disturbing the air. The amber glow of the lantern seemed to deepen now, casting long, gentle shadows that stretched and swayed with the unseen breeze. Outside, the rustling leaves had quieted further, replaced by the almost imperceptible murmur of a stream flowing somewhere beyond the garden walls. A small fish surfaced in a nearby pond, creating a ripple that briefly disturbed the reflection of the lantern light on the water surface. The weightlessness deepened, a sensation of floating suspended between waking and dreaming, held by the rhythm of folding and the quiet dark. Each new crane seemed to absorb not just light, but also the stillness itself, becoming a vessel for peace in the deepening night. The paper felt cool and smooth beneath the fingers, each crease a quiet echo of intention. Another crane took shape, its wings unfolding slowly as if remembering flight in a forgotten dream. Dust motes danced within the amber light, swirling like tiny stars caught in a gentle current. The scent of sandalwood from the nearby incense burner drifted on the air, blending with the damp earthiness after evening dew. A woman swept the stone path outside, her movements slow and deliberate, barely disturbing the quiet. The stream's murmur grew even softer, a distant lullaby woven into the fabric of the night. More cranes joined their silent company, arranged on shelves that seemed to recede into shadow. The lantern's glow painted the walls with warm hues, softening the edges of everything it touched. A single firefly blinked briefly beyond the garden wall, a fleeting spark against the deepening indigo. Weightlessness settled deeper still, like sinking into a pool of quiet warmth, held by the rhythm of paper and light. The scent of plum blossoms drifted on the air, a sweetness barely perceptible, yet deeply comforting. Another crane took shape, hands moving with practiced grace, each fold a quiet offering to the stillness. Dust motes danced in the lantern light, swirling like miniature stars caught in a gentle current. The garden wall held its secrets close, only the faintest rustle of leaves hinting at life beyond. Weightlessness deepened further, a slow surrender to the pull of sleep, like petals falling on water. A woman swept the stone path outside, the soft brush strokes echoing the rhythm of breathing. The indigo deepened now, swallowing the last traces of twilight and embracing the night. More cranes joined their silent brethren, lining the shelves in rows of pale paper wings. The lantern's glow warmed the bamboo mat beneath, a gentle heat radiating outwards. A distant fish splashed in its pond, a single silver note in the symphony of quietude. The woman continued sweeping, each movement a quiet offering to the descending dark. A new scent drifted from within star, anise and something like warm earth after rain. Another crane took shape beneath her hands, its wings unfolding with deliberate slowness. The indigo deepened further, becoming almost tangible, a velvet curtain drawn across the world. Dust motes danced in the lantern light, tiny galaxies swirling in a peaceful orbit. She placed the finished crane on the shelf beside the others, adding to the silent gathering. A feeling of weightlessness seemed to settle with the night. The pond's surface reflected the faint glow of stars now appearing, fragmented diamonds scattered on black silk. Another distant splash broke the stillness, a gentle reminder of life hidden beneath the water lily. The bamboo mat retained the warmth from the lantern, radiating a subtle comfort that eased into the stone floor. The woman's hands moved with a practiced grace, each fold of the paper a quiet echo in the stillness. Dust motes danced in the lantern light, swirling like miniature stars mirroring those above the pond. A faint scent of star anise drifted from a small bowl on the table, mingling with the earthy fragrance rising from the shelf of cranes grew longer, their paper forms casting delicate shadows that lengthened and softened as the night deepened. Outside, the bamboo leaves rustled almost imperceptibly, a whisper against the growing quiet. She smoothed another finished crane, its wings curved in perpetual flight, before adding it to the silent company. The pond's reflection now held more stars than water, each tiny point of light trembling with an inner luminescence. A slow drip from the eaves formed a small circle on the stone path, expanding and dissolving into the darkness. The warmth radiating from the bamboo mat had spread further across the floor, inviting a deeper sense of rest. Weightlessness continued to settle, not as emptiness but as a gentle holding, blurring the line between waking and dreaming. Another crane joined the others, a pale echo against the deepening indigo of the room. The scent of night-blooming jasmine drifted in through the open window, mingling with the cool earthiness rising from the pond. Each drip from the eaves now released a soft plink into the stillness, each circle briefly holding the shape of a miniature moon. The bamboo mat's warmth had reached the wall behind her, a gentle pressure against the aged wood. Weightlessness felt less like falling and more like being held by the vastness of the night itself. A single firefly pulsed near the water lilies, its light a fleeting spark in the star-strewn reflection. The pond's surface shimmered, each star below seeming to breathe with a slow, rhythmic glow. She smoothed the paper of another crane, her movements unhurried and deliberate, like the turning of seasons. A distant fish broke the water's surface, leaving only a widening ripple in its wake, a silent disturbance, quickly absorbed by the calm. The line between the crane's shadows and the starlight grew fainter with each passing moment, blending into a single peaceful obscurity. The scent of night-blooming jasmine drifted through the open window, a soft veil upon the stillness. Another crane took shape beneath her hands, its wings mirroring the delicate curve of a crescent moon glimpsed between branches. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light illuminating the paper, each one a tiny star held captive for a moment. The pond's reflection deepened, the stars within seeming to multiply and swell with an inner luminescence. A gentle weightlessness settled over everything, as if the room itself were slowly lifting towards the constellations. She continued folding, her fingers tracing the familiar lines with a quiet grace, unburdened by thought or intention. The shadows of the cranes now held hints of silver, indistinguishable from the starlight they cast upon the floor. A distant owl called softly, its sound absorbed into the vastness of the night and the pond's tranquil surface. The line between the real and reflected stars blurred further, creating a sense of infinite depth and peaceful expansion. Each completed crane joined the others, forming a silent constellation on the low table, bathed in the soft glow of the firefly's pulse. The jasmine scent carried on the still air seemed to thicken with each fold of paper, a gentle sweetness settling over everything. Her hands moved as if guided by the rhythm of the pond's breathing, slow and deliberate, never rushing. A single firefly drifted closer to the window, its light painting fleeting patterns on the newest cranes before fading again into the darkness. The weightlessness deepened, not a lifting sensation, but a softening, as if gravity itself had grown tired and released its hold. On the pond's surface, lily pads appeared as dark islands in a sea of starlight, their edges dissolving into the reflected sky. More cranes took shape, each one identical yet subtly different, holding within them the quiet energy of the night. The constellation on the table grew larger, mirroring the vastness above, a silent echo of the universe unfolding. Dust motes danced in the firefly's beam, swirling like miniature stars caught in an endless waltz. A woman swept the stone floor outside, her movements slow and rhythmic, barely disturbing the peaceful stillness. The line between the real cranes and their reflections became almost imperceptible, a shimmering illusion of infinite repetition and calm expansion. The jasmine scent, released from a small bowl nearby, drifted amongst the cranes like a gentle fog, softening their edges. Another crane appeared in her hands, its wings unfolding with the same deliberate grace as all the others, adding to the growing flock on the low table. The pond outside deepened further, the water becoming a dark, still mirror, reflecting not just the stars, but also the faint glow of the firefly's light. A single fish surfaced in the pond, creating ripples that distorted the constellation's image for a fleeting moment before it smoothed back into perfect symmetry. The woman continued sweeping, her brush whispering against the stone, a sound like distant waves on a quiet shore. Each new crane seemed to absorb a little more of the room's stillness, becoming almost weightless in its form. Dust motes continued their slow dance, illuminated by the firefly, now appearing as if they were drifting through the cranes themselves. The constellation on the table pulsed with a soft internal light. Breathing long, inhale, gentle exhale. The line between the real world and its reflection blurred further, so that the stone floor seemed to extend endlessly into the night pond steps. A feeling of quiet expansion filled the room, as if the walls themselves were slowly dissolving into the jasmine-scented darkness. Another crane took shape, its paper wings unfolding with a quiet grace that barely disturbed the air. The firefly's light now traced the delicate curves of each newly formed bird, highlighting the subtle shadows within their fold. A woman swept the stone floor slowly, her movements as fluid and unhurried as the pond water itself. Each sweep seemed to gather not dust, but fragments of moonlight, adding them to the growing constellation on the table. The scent of jasmine deepened, weaving through the room like a gentle current, softening the edges of everything it touched. A small bowl held shimmering flakes, offered to fish that moved with languid ease in the night pond's reflection. The constellations pulsed slower now, matching the rhythm not just of breathing, but of something deeper, the earth's quiet turning. The stone floor continued its extension into the reflected depths, becoming less a surface and more a gateway to an unseen world. The cranes themselves seemed to breathe with the room, their paper bodies expanding and contracting, almost imperceptibly in the dim light. A feeling of boundless space settled over everything, as if the walls had completely dissolved, leaving only jasmine, scented darkness, and the soft glow of distant stars. Another hand, slow and deliberate, unfolded a square of indigo paper, its edges catching the faintest starlight. The new crane joined the others, each one mirroring the gentle curve of the pond's surface in its delicate form. Dust motes danced in the jasmine-scented air, illuminated by the soft glow emanating from the water and stars. The stone floor seemed to ripple outwards, not with movement, but with a deepening sense of stillness. A woman swept the veranda outside, the brush whispering against the wood, a sound like distant waves. The fish swam in ever slower circles, their scales catching glimpses of the constellations above. The scent of jasmine grew richer, almost tangible, weaving itself into the fabric of the darkness. Each folded crane held a tiny echo of the night sky within its paper wings, expanding the feeling of boundless space. A single lantern flickered further down the path, casting long shadows that blended seamlessly with the surrounding trees. The room breathed deeper now, a quiet rhythm of expansion and contraction, mirroring the earth's slow turning and the languid movements of the fish below. Another indigo crane took shape, its delicate form joining the others, a silent constellation growing within the quiet room. The jasmine scent deepened still, now tasting almost of moonlight and cool stone, settling like dew on closed petals. Each breath the room exhaled seemed to carry with it the faintest shimmer of blue, dispersing into the shadows beyond the lantern light. Down at the water's edge, a hand gently scattered flakes of rice for the fish, their movements now barely ripples in the dark surface. The stone floor continued its slow yielding, becoming less solid and more like a pool, reflecting the deepening indigo above. A soft glow emanated from within the paper cranes themselves, as if they held captured starlight, pulsing with a gentle rhythm. The lantern's flame danced without sound, painting the leaves of the trees in shades of charcoal and silver, then fading back to black. The room inhaled deeply, drawing in the scent of jasmine and the quiet energy of the turning earth, expanding outwards once more. A feeling of weightlessness settled over everything, as if the boundaries between floor and ceiling were beginning to dissolve. The fish swam on, their scales now indistinguishable from the constellations mirrored within the deepening reflection below. Another crane took shape, hands moving with a slow grace that didn't disturb the stillness, adding another point of luminescence to the growing constellation within the room. The soft glow from each paper bird seemed to deepen the shadows between them, creating pockets of velvety darkness, where only the scent of jasmine lingered. The lantern flame continued its silent ballet, now tracing the veins of leaves with a fleeting, ethereal light before returning to its core warmth. With each completed crane, the room breathed a little slower, a deeper inhale that seemed to pull the very air into itself and hold it suspended. Dust motes danced in the beams of light, swirling like miniature stars caught in an unseen current, mirroring the fish below. The stone floor began to reflect not just the lanterns and cranes, but also the subtle shifts in color within the shadows themselves, a deepening indigo now, touched with violet. A hand gently scattered more fish food, the tiny flakes disappearing into the dark water ripple, feeding unseen life below. The feeling of weightlessness intensified, as if the walls were softening, becoming less defined, blending into the surrounding darkness. The scent of jasmine grew richer, almost tangible now, wrapping around everything like a warm embrace and blurring the edges of perception. Each pulse from the paper cranes resonated with the earth's slow turning, a quiet rhythm that echoed in the stillness and invited complete surrender. The indigo deepened further, pooling like liquid night across the stone floor, mirroring constellations only visible to quiet minds. Another crane was folded, its paper wings catching a faint glimmer of starlight that seemed to originate from within the room itself. Dust motes danced in the lantern light, each one a tiny spark suspended in the growing stillness, following currents unseen and unheard. The hand continued its slow rhythm, scattering food with an unhurried grace, offering sustenance to the shadows beneath the water surface. A gentle warmth radiated from the jasmine blossoms, softening the angles of the room and blurring the distinction between wall and air. The scent now clung to everything: the stone, the paper cranes, even the quiet breath that moved through the space. Each pulse from a newly completed crane felt less like a sound and more like a gentle expansion within the chest, mirroring the earth's own slow inhale. The reflections on the floor began to swirl, not with movement, but with an internal luminescence, as if lit from below by hidden stars. Weightlessness deepened still further, a sense of being held suspended in a vast and peaceful darkness, cradled by the turning world. The boundaries between self and surroundings dissolved a little more with each breath, becoming porous and indistinct like mist at dawn. Another crane joined the others, its paper wings settling with a stillness that barely disturbed the air. The jasmine scent deepened now, weaving itself into the very texture of the shadows, cool and smooth against the skin. Reflections on the stone floor pulsed again, each one a tiny galaxy blooming and fading in slow motion. A hand moved slowly, deliberately, scattering fish food onto the water's surface, silver motes disappearing into the dark depths. The room itself seemed to breathe more deeply now, a long, gentle exhale that resonated through the stone walls. Weightlessness wasn't simply absence of weight, but a soft embrace like floating on warm currents. The light from within the reflections grew stronger, hinting at constellations unseen by waking eyes. A woman swept the veranda outside, the rhythmic brush strokes a quiet counterpoint to the earth's turning. With each completed crane, the sense of separation lessened, the self becoming less defined, more like an echo in a vast chamber. The darkness felt not empty, but full of boundless space cradling all things, breathing with the slow rhythm of the world and the quiet pulse of starlight. The veranda's shadows lengthened, stretching like quiet fingers across the stone floor, as the woman continued her slow, deliberate sweeping. Each brushstroke released a subtle wave of jasmine fragrance, mingling with the cool air drifting in from the garden. Within the reflections, the constellations bloomed further, tiny silver blossoms against an indigo velvet sky. Weightlessness deepened now, not as a falling sensation, but as a gentle unfolding, like petals opening to the moon. The light within seemed to pulse with the rhythm of distant waves, a soft luminescence that painted the room in shades of pearl and lavender. A school of koi glided beneath the surface of the pond outside, their scales catching fleeting glimpses of starlight. Another crane was completed, adding another layer to the quiet pattern on the veranda, each stroke a breath released into the stillness. The boundaries between the room and the garden blurred further, as if one simply flowed into the other, seamless and unbound. A sense of spaciousness grew within, an echoing chamber where thoughts drifted like clouds across a boundless horizon. The earth continued its turning, a slow, majestic dance felt not through movement, but through the quiet pulse of light and shadow, synchronizing with the room's gentle breath. The brush continued its soft whisper across the paper, each line a continuation of the jasmine-scented air. Dust motes danced in the pale light filtering through the shoji screens, mirroring the slow swirl of koi below. A woman swept the veranda with deliberate grace, her movements as fluid and unhurried as the turning earth. The scent of damp stone rose from the garden path, mingling with the sweetness of night-blooming flowers. Within the room, a feeling of weightlessness deepened, as if held by an invisible current. Shadows lengthened and softened, blurring the edges of furniture into gentle forms. The koi moved in silent constellations beneath the water's surface, their patterns echoing the stars above. Another crane took shape on the paper, a delicate echo of all those that had come before, each one a release. A distant chime resonated softly, blending with the quiet pulse of light and shadow, a rhythm felt in the bones. The boundaries between breath and space continued to dissolve, leaving only an expansive stillness within. The scent of jasmine, carried on the slow sweep of the broom, settled like a gentle mist over everything it touched. Dust motes danced in the fading light, each one a tiny star mirroring those reflected in the pond's dark surface. A new crane unfolded from the brush, its wings barely disturbing the quiet air, joining the silent flock on the scroll. The koi drifted deeper into their constellations, silver and gold shifting, with an internal luminescence. Weightlessness seemed to seep into the floorboards, rising slowly like a tide, softening every edge. The rhythm of the earth pulsed now not just in the bones, but within the very stillness itself, a slow, steady hum. Shadows pooled and reformed, no longer defining shapes but suggesting them, hinting at forms beyond perception. A single leaf fell from the unseen tree outside, spiraling downwards with an unhurried grace, landing without a sound. The distant chime resonated again, less as a sound now and more as a feeling, a vibration in the chest, a widening of space. Continued to flow, effortless and unbound, merging seamlessly with the quiet pulse of light and shadow, becoming one with everything around it. The jasmine scent carried on the barley, their breeze seemed to weave itself into the shadows themselves, softening their edges further. Dust motes danced in the last slivers of light, each one a tiny spark reflecting the quiet pulse within the room. A woman swept the stone path outside, her movements slow and deliberate, mirroring the unhurried descent of the leaf from moments before. The koi swam deeper into the water lilies, their white scales catching faint glimmers of light like submerged moons. The rhythm of the earth now resonated in the smooth, cool surface of the stone basin, holding a single floating bloom. Patterns on the koi's bodies weren't just colors anymore, but shifting landscapes seen through clouded glass, internal worlds unfolding. A distant bellboy chimed again, its tone dissolving into the stillness like sugar in warm water. A feeling of expansion rather than a sound. The light deepened to indigo, pooling around the edges of perception, blurring the line between what was seen and what was imagined. Moved through the body, carrying with it the scent of jasmine and the quiet hum of the earth's slow turning. Even the space between things felt full. A gentle weightlessness, a peaceful suspension in time and light. The indigo deepened further, now a velvet curtain drawn across the horizon, softening every edge of the garden. A single firefly pulsed into being, its light a tiny echo of distant stars reflected in the still pond water. The scent of jasmine was almost tangible, a warm breath against the skin, weaving itself into the fabric of the deepening twilight. Koi moved beneath the surface like painted shadows, each one disappearing slowly into the cool dark depths as if entering a dream. Dust motes danced in the last slivers of light, illuminated by the gentle glow of unseen lanterns within the house. The rhythm of the earth felt less like a turning and more like a breathing, a slow expansive rise and fall that resonated through bone and muscle. A woman swept the stone path with a soft brush, her movements unhurried, blending seamlessly into the quiet landscape. Weightlessness wasn't an absence of feeling, but rather a fullness, a gentle cradling by something vast and unseen. The bellboy chimed again, less distinct now, more like a memory of sound than a present occurrence, dissolving completely into the indigo. Even the shadows seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with the earth's slow pulse, holding within them the quiet peace of the night. The stone path, now dusted with the woman's careful sweeping, held a coolness that rose through bare feet, as if touched by moonlight itself. A single firefly blinked into existence near the jasmine vine, its light a tiny echo of the stars beginning to bloom above. Below the surface of the pond, the koi moved like slow brushstrokes in dark water, each turn a silent meditation on stillness. The scent of jasmine deepened with the fading warmth, becoming almost tangible, a soft blanket woven into the night air. Weightlessness settled further, not just around the body, but within it, a gentle hum resonating with the earth's slow breath. Shadows lengthened and softened, pooling at the base of ancient stone lanterns, their forms indistinct and dreamlike. The bellboy's chime was now only a phantom vibration, felt more in the chest than heard by the ears. A few petals detached from the jasmine blossoms, drifting downwards to join the quiet darkness beneath the leaves. The indigo deepened into violet, then into a shade so dark, it seemed to hold all the secrets of the sleeping world. Even the air felt heavy with peace, a stillness that invited complete surrender to the rhythm of the earth and the embrace of night. The violet deepened still, becoming a canvas where the faintest silver dust seemed to swirl and settle like forgotten stars. Beneath the jasmine, the darkness was not empty, but full of the scent's gentle weight, a soft pressure against the skin. A single firefly pulsed with a slow, deliberate light, mirroring the rhythm of a distant, unseen heart. The koi, now barely visible beneath the water lilies, moved as if swimming through liquid night itself, their scales catching only glimmers of reflected starlight. Stone steps worn smooth by countless seasons held the coolness of the earth and the memory of warm sunlight. A woman swept the veranda with a slow, even motion, her presence a quiet echo in the stillness. The bellboy's phantom vibration had almost dissolved entirely, leaving only a sense of spaciousness within the silence. Petals continued to fall from the jasmine vines, each one a tiny surrender to the deepening embrace of the night. A soft mist began to rise from the pond, blurring the edges of the water and softening the outlines of the bamboo grove. The air grew heavier still, a comforting weight that invited the body to sink deeper into rest, mirroring the slow descent of shadows all around. The woman continued her sweeping, the bristles whispering against the stone floor, a sound as soft as dust motes settling. Each sweep seemed to gather not debris, but the last lingering warmth of the day folding it into the deepening shadows. The mist from the pond had thickened now, a pearly curtain veiling the reflections of the jasmine vines. Within that mist, the koi moved like dreams, flashes of orange and white barely distinguishable from the liquid darkness below. A single lantern cast a pool of amber light on the veranda, its glow unable to fully pierce the growing obscurity beyond. The scent of jasmine was almost overwhelming now, a sweet, heavy fragrance that clung to the air like a gentle embrace. Shadows lengthened and pooled, blurring the distinction between the bamboo grove and the deepening night itself. A few petals still drifted down from the vines, landing silently on the mist-covered pond, disappearing without a ripple. The bellboy was gone now, not even a memory of vibration remaining, only an immense quietude. The air felt saturated with stillness, a comforting weight that encouraged each breath to slow and deepen, mirroring the rhythm of the night. The last sliver of rose gold faded from the western sky, leaving only a deep indigo wash above the bamboo. Jasmine tendrils heavy with bloom seemed to exhale their perfume into the thickening darkness, each breath a wave of sweetness. Down at the pond's edge, the koi moved like painted shadows, barely disturbing the surface as they glided through the water lilies. A woman swept the stone path with slow, deliberate strokes, the soft rasp of bristles against the flagstones, the only sound for some time. The mist rose higher now, a cool, damp veil that softened every edge and muted every color to shades of gray and silver. Even the bamboo stalks appeared less defined, their green dissolving into the surrounding night like watercolor on wet paper. A single lantern glowed softly in a distant pavilion, its light a warm amber pool that didn't quite reach the grove but hinted at peaceful presence. Someone was feeding the fish now, tiny splashes barely audible above the quiet hum of unseen insects. The scent of jasmine had settled into every pore, becoming less a fragrance and more a feeling, a gentle weight on the skin. Each breath felt deeper still, pulling in the cool night air and releasing all tension with each slow exhale, mirroring the pond's stillness. The koi, now indistinguishable from the shadows at the pond's edge, moved with a languid grace, their scales catching only the faintest glimmer of starlight. Above them, fireflies began to punctuate the darkness, each pulse a tiny, fleeting echo of the distant lantern's glow. The jasmine scent had woven itself into the very fabric of the air, clinging to the leaves and stone lanterns like a soft mist. A gentle breeze stirred through the bamboo, causing the faintest rustling sound to whisper against the deeper silence. The amber light from the pavilion seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with an almost imperceptible rhythm. Someone continued sweeping the path near the pavilion, the soft brushstrokes barely disturbing the quietude. Each splash as fish were fed was now less a sound and more a vibration felt through the earth beneath your resting place. The pond's surface reflected not the moon directly, but the diffused glow of countless stars, creating an impression of depth without clarity. Darkness had fully embraced the grove, softening all edges and blurring distinctions between form and shadow. With each exhale, the feeling of jasmine deepened, a comforting weight that settled into your bones, inviting further release. The sweeping continued, a slow dance of bristles against stone, each movement mirroring the gentle rise and fall of your own breath. Now even the vibration from feeding the fish felt less like a touch on the earth and more like a resonance within your own body. The star-scattered reflection on the pond deepened, becoming a swirling nebula held captive in the still water. Darkness pooled around the edges of the pavilion, not as an absence of light, but as a presence of soft enveloping cloth. Koi drifted beneath the surface, their scales catching only hints of starlight, indistinguishable from the shadows they inhabited. The scent of jasmine had woven itself into the very air, clinging to your skin like a second layer of warmth. A distant lantern flickered beyond the grove, its light too faint to penetrate the darkness, merely suggesting another quiet life unfolding. Each inhale brought the subtle sweetness of night-blooming flowers, Each exhale released any remaining tension into the stillness. The boundary between the pond and the shadows dissolved further, until it felt as though you were floating within a boundless dark expanse. A sense of weightlessness settled over everything, a gentle surrender to the quiet rhythm of the grove, and the deepening peace within yourself. The jasmine's fragrance now seemed to emanate from you, a soft bloom of scent mirroring the unseen flowers around. A coolness brushed your fingertips, not of cold but of absence, the absence of effort, of holding, of needing to be anywhere else. The dark water held no reflection, only absorbed light, becoming a velvet plain beneath an endless sky. You could feel the gentle pulse of the grove itself, a slow thrumming that resonated deep within your bones. The distant lantern's glow had softened further, now appearing as a single star fallen to earth and dimmed by distance. Koi moved below, not as fish anymore, but as shifting shapes of shadow, extensions of the darkness itself. Each breath was less a taking in of air, and more an invitation for stillness to fill every space within you. The weightlessness deepened, dissolving the edges of your form until there was only sensation, warmth, coolness, scent, pulse. A quiet sweeping sound drifted from somewhere beyond the trees, rhythmic and unhurried, like the brushing of wings. And in that complete surrender, a sense of belonging bloomed, a peaceful resonance with the boundless dark expanse surrounding you. The darkness wasn't empty, but full of a gentle pressure, like being held by the earth itself. Warmth lingered on your skin, not as heat but as recognition, a remembering of sun-drenched stones and slow rivers. Coolness traced the hollows of your wrists, mirroring the soft descent of evening dew upon petals. The scent of damp moss and distant wood smoke drifted closer, weaving themselves into the fabric of your stillness. Each pulse felt less like a beat within you, and more like an echo of the vast rhythm of the world outside. Shadows continued their slow dance beneath the surface, now unfurling the unfurling roots of ancient trees. The sweeping sound persisted, a constant companion, a lullaby whispered by unseen hands tending to forgotten gardens. Boundaries softened further, the space between your breath and the darkness becoming indistinguishable. A quiet hum resonated through your bones, a peaceful vibration aligning you with something larger than yourself. Weightlessness was complete now, an effortless floating within a boundless ocean of calm, where all sensation simply is. The hum deepened, not as a sound now, but as the feeling of cool water flowing around smooth stones. Each inhale drew the darkness closer, a velvet curtain settling over every edge of awareness. Weightlessness wasn't simply in the ocean, it was the ocean, boundless and still. The roots beneath shifted again, now mirroring the branching pathways within your own body, a quiet map unfolding. Distant chimes, almost imperceptible, echoed the rhythm of a slow, steady pulse. A gentle warmth bloomed in the center of your chest, expanding outwards like sunlight on water. The sweeping continued its patient work, gathering stray thoughts and smoothing them into silence. Boundaries dissolved further still. There was no longer in you to feel weightless, only the feeling itself. A sense of spaciousness opened within, a vast cathedral built of quiet breath and soft shadows. The darkness held everything, every sensation, every memory, every possibility, in perfect stillness. The warmth now felt less like sunlight and more like the gentle hum of the earth itself, a vibration that settled deep within your bones. It wasn't a heat to be noticed, but a presence, a quiet, knowing held in every cell. Dust motes danced in the unseen beams filtering through the window, each one a tiny spark reflecting the inner glow. The rhythm of the sweeping became less distinct, blending into the larger pulse of the darkness, like waves meeting the shore. There was no effort to hold on to any feeling, only in allowing a surrender to the boundless space that had opened up. Memories surfaced not as stories, but as colors and textures, soft washes against the inner walls of this quiet cathedral. The darkness wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with potential, a silent garden waiting for unseen blooms. A distant chime echoed, barely audible, resonating within the spaciousness, a single note dissolving into everything. Weightlessness deepened, not as an absence of gravity, but as a complete immersion in stillness, like floating on a calm sea. The boundaries between breath and shadow continued to soften until they were no longer separate at all, simply two aspects of the same quiet whole. The colors within the cathedral shifted, a slow bloom of indigo deepening into amethyst at the edges of perception. A gentle warmth radiated from these inner hues, not hot but like sunlight filtered through layers of silk. Dust motes danced in unseen beams, each one a tiny spark reflecting the quiet garden's potential. The sensation of floating grew more complete, as if the sea itself had risen to meet and embrace every surface. A woman swept the stone floor far below, her movements slow and deliberate, echoing the rhythm of tides. The chime returned fainter still, a silver thread woven into the fabric of the darkness. Shadows lengthened and softened, becoming less defined edges and more like pools of cool velvet. A small school of fish drifted in an unseen pond, their scales catching glimmers of the amethyst light. The boundaries between breathing and stillness dissolved further, a gentle merging of inner and outer space. Weightlessness wasn't merely felt. It was a complete acceptance of being held by everything, everywhere at once. The amethyst light pulsed slowly, not with brightness, but with a deepening of hue, like ink blooming in water. Around the edges of awareness, a soft indigo began to gather, mirroring the twilight sky held within the cathedral's unseen dome. A woman swept the stone floor of a distant temple, the rhythmic swish of bristles barely audible, a counterpoint to the silence. The school of fish moved as one, their silver bodies tracing patterns that weren't shaped so much as feelings, contentment, perhaps, or quiet observation. Weightlessness continued its gentle expansion, now less about the body and more about thoughts themselves, drifting like dandelion seeds on a summer breeze. The sensation of breathing softened further, becoming an echo rather than a necessity, a subtle rise and fall within the vastness. Cool velvet shadows pooled deeper still, not obscuring anything, but cradling it in a gentle embrace, like hands holding starlight. A faint scent of rain-washed stone rose from somewhere far below, mingling with the quiet hum of existence itself. The boundaries between self and space continued to dissolve, each inhale bringing a wider sense of belonging, an effortless merging. Distant chimes, almost imperceptible now, resonated not in the ears but within the bones, a silver vibration confirming everything was as it should be. The velvet shadows deepened to indigo, a color of quiet oceans and distant nebulae, pooling around the edges of awareness. A single firefly pulsed with a soft internal luminescence, its light not cutting through the darkness, but being the darkness, momentarily more defined. The scent of rain-washed stone grew subtly sweeter, hinting at moss and ancient roots reaching deep within the earth. Each breath now felt less like an act, and more like a wave gently lapping against a shore, receding into stillness. A woman swept the flagstones of a courtyard far below, her movements slow and deliberate, mirroring the rhythm of falling leaves. The silver vibration from the chimes seemed to originate not from any specific place, but from within the very air itself, a constant hum of peace. Indigo deepened further still, becoming almost tangible, like a soft fabric draped over everything, weightless and warm. A school of koi drifted through a moonlit pond, their scales catching faint glimmers of light as they moved without urgency or direction. The boundaries between the body and the cool air continued to soften, dissolving into an expansive quietude, like smoke dispersing in the breeze. A distant lantern glowed with a steady, unwavering warmth, offering no illumination but simply being, a point of gentle presence in the vastness. The scent of night-blooming jasmine drifted on the air, a sweetness so subtle it felt more like a memory than an actual fragrance. Each breath seemed to carry with it a lessening of weight, as if exhaling not just air but all small concerns. The koi continued their silent journey, occasionally brushing against smooth stones at the pond's bottom, creating no ripple beyond the faintest disturbance in the silver light. Above, the indigo deepened further, now flecked with the palest lavender like distant stars woven into a velvet cloth. A woman swept the stone path of a nearby garden, her movements slow and deliberate, mirroring the rhythm of falling leaves. The lantern's glow remained constant, a small sun holding its place in the deepening twilight, neither growing nor diminishing. The cool air felt less like an external presence and more like an extension of skin, a gentle embrace without pressure. A single firefly pulsed with a soft green light, rising and falling in time, with the quiet hum that permeated everything. Someone fed fish at the edge of the pond, scattering flakes onto the water surface. The koi rose to meet them without haste. The boundaries between seeing and feeling blurred further still, as if the world was being perceived not through eyes but through a gentle resonance within. The scent of damp earth rose with the cooling air, a fragrance both ancient and familiar, like remembering a dream half forgotten. Dust motes danced in the lantern's beam, each one a tiny spark drifting on currents too subtle to feel directly. The koi moved beneath the water's surface as if propelled by thought alone, their scales catching glimpses of the fading light. A distant chime, perhaps from a temple far away, resonated not in the ears but within the bones, a gentle vibration. The green pulse of the firefly softened further, becoming less a distinct flash and more a shimmer woven into the twilight itself. Someone continued sweeping the stone path, the soft rasp of bristles against rock, a rhythm mirroring the quiet hum. The water lilies had closed for the night, their white petals folding inward like hands at rest. A faint sweetness drifted on the breeze, perhaps from unseen blossoms hidden amongst the trees, barely there but undeniably present. The feeling of skin continued to expand, as if becoming one with the cool air and the soft glow surrounding everything. Even the lantern's light seemed less a source of illumination and more a quality within the deepening stillness. The hum deepened, not as a sound so much as a vibration felt in the bones, a resonance with the earth itself. Dust motes danced within the lantern's glow, each one a tiny spark of light, briefly held before dissolving back into the quiet dark. A single fish surfaced in the pond, its scales catching a fleeting glimmer before it slipped silently beneath the water lilies again. The air grew cooler still, and the feeling of expansion continued, as if the skin were becoming porous, allowing the night to flow through. Someone tended to the small fireflies' lanterns, releasing them one by one into the branches of the willow trees. Shadows lengthened and softened, blurring the edges of stone and leaf until everything seemed to melt together. The sweetness on the breeze intensified slightly, hinting at jasmine and something wilder deeper in the woods. A distant chime sounded, not from a bell, but perhaps from wind passing through hollow reeds, barely audible yet profoundly calming. The white petals of the water lilies remained closed, cradling the darkness within their gentle curves like precious secrets. Even the stone path seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the sweeping, each bristle stroke smoothing away not just debris, but also any lingering tension. The sweeping continued, a slow dance with the dust motes illuminated by the fading light. A coolness rose from the water, not chilling but refreshing, like a gentle hand laid on warm skin. The scent of jasmine now mingled with damp earth and the faintest trace of pine needles, creating an aroma that settled deep within the lungs. Each breath seemed to carry the weightless feeling of falling leaves, spiraling downwards into quietude. The stone path, warmed by the day's sun, slowly relinquished its heat to the approaching night air. Shadows now pooled in the hollows of the lily's broad leaves. A single firefly blinked distantly, a tiny pulse of light answering the unseen chime from the reeds. The white petals remained steadfastly closed, holding the darkness as a promise rather than a concealment. Even the air itself felt softer now, less defined, more like a gentle embrace surrounding everything. A quiet vibration hummed through the ground, barely perceptible yet resonating with the slow rhythm of the sweeping and the stillness of the water. The scent of damp earth rose with the cooling air, mingling with the sweetness that hinted at unseen blossoms further along the bank. A thin mist began to gather just above the water's surface, blurring the reflections of the stars into shimmering streaks. The firefly's light pulsed again, slower now, as if mirroring the deepening quiet within the garden itself. Each sweep of the brush seemed to stir not dust, but a gentle wave of coolness through the air, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine. The white lilies remained closed, their forms growing softer at the edges, almost indistinguishable from the shadows around them. A distant ripple disturbed the water's surface, spreading outwards in concentric circles that faded before reaching the shore. The vibration beneath the ground continued its steady hum, a quiet pulse felt more than heard, like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. Above, the first few stars had companions now, tiny pinpricks of light appearing one by one against the darkening velvet sky. The air grew heavier with stillness, a comforting weight that settled over everything like a soft blanket. Even the unseen chime from the reeds seemed to have softened, becoming less a sound and more a feeling of peace resonating through the night. The scent of damp earth rose with the mist, a cool fragrance that mingled with the faint sweetness of night-blooming jasmine, carried on the barely there breeze. A thin layer of silver began to dust the tips of the reeds, reflecting the growing starlight in delicate shimmering points. The sweeping continued its slow arc, each brush gathering fallen leaves and whispering them into a quiet pile, undisturbed by any urgency. Deeper within the water, luminescent algae pulsed with a gentle internal glow, barely visible, but adding to the feeling of hidden light. The vibration from the earth deepened slightly, becoming less a pulse and more a constant presence, like breathing itself. Shadows lengthened and blurred at the edges, softening the distinction between tree and ground, form and space. A single firefly traced a lazy circle near the water's edge, its light a fleeting spark against the deepening indigo of the night. The chime from the reeds was now almost entirely, felt a gentle pressure on the chest, a quiet resonance within the bone. Above, more stars appeared, forming constellations that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves with glacial slowness. The air held its breath, a profound stillness settling over the landscape like a final, comforting embrace before sleep. The scent of damp earth rose with the cooling air, mingling with the faintest sweetness from unseen blossoms. Dust motes danced in the last slivers of twilight that filtered through the branches, each a tiny galaxy unto itself. The rhythmic swish of the broom continued its quiet work, gathering fallen leaves and smoothing the path. A heron stood motionless at the water's edge, a gray statue reflecting in the darkening surface. The firefly's circle widened slightly, then contracted, a pulse of light against the velvet night. Above, the constellation seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with an imperceptible grace. A distant fish broke the water's skin, creating ripples that spread outwards like whispered secrets. The chime from the reeds had faded almost entirely now, leaving only a lingering warmth in its wake. Shadows deepened further, blending the textures of stone and wood into a single unified form. A soft breeze stirred the leaves, carrying with it the promise of deeper stillness to come. The scent of night-blooming jasmine drifted on the breeze, a sweetness barely there yet filling all the space around. Stone lanterns cast pools of amber light that softened the edges of the garden path, inviting quiet contemplation. A figure continued to sweep the courtyard, each brushstroke a slow exhale against the growing darkness. The water lilies had closed for the night. Above, the constellations held steady, their light seeming less about illumination and more about presence. Another fish surfaced, its movement creating concentric circles that disturbed the reflection of the stars just enough to notice. The warmth from the chime lingered as a gentle pressure behind the eyes, a quiet hum resonating within. Shadows pooled beneath the branches of the ancient willow tree, obscuring the details of its roots. A small bowl of fish food sat on the stone ledge, slowly emptying with each silent offering. The leaves rustled again, this time carrying not a promise, but the actual feeling of stillness settling over everything. The scent of night-blooming jasmine drifted on the air, a sweetness almost too faint to register, yet undeniably present. Dust motes danced in the last slivers of moonlight filtering through the willow's leaves, each particle catching and releasing a tiny spark of silver. A woman swept the stone path with slow, deliberate strokes, the bristles whispering against the cool surface. The water lilies had closed for the night, their broad leaves forming dark, quiet pools on the pond's surface. Another handful of fish food disappeared into the water, creating momentary ripples that expanded and faded like breath. The shadows beneath the willow deepened further, becoming a soft velvety darkness where shapes were only suggested, not defined. A distant bell chimed once, its sound barely audible, more felt than heard, a vibration in the chest rather than an echo in the ear. The warmth from the earlier chime seemed to have settled into the stone itself, radiating a gentle coolness now, like holding a smooth river rock. Fireflies began to appear, blinking slowly and sporadically amongst the branches, their lights mirroring the distant stars above. The leaves rustled one last time, not with stillness this time, but with the quiet acceptance of the deepening night. The scent of night-blooming jasmine drifted on the air, a sweetness so subtle it felt like a memory rather than a smell. Each blink of a firefly seemed to pull another star into sharper focus above, as if they were answering each other across the vastness. A woman continued sweeping the stone path, her movements slow and deliberate, barely disturbing the quiet dusk. The coolness radiating from the stones now extended outwards. Small fish surfaced in the pond, their scales catching the faint starlight like scattered silver coins. The shadows had begun to pool around the base of the stone lanterns, softening their edges until they were almost indistinguishable from the surrounding foliage. A single petal detached itself from a night-blooming cereus and spiraled downwards, landing silently on the water's surface. The rhythm of the sweeping was now less a sound and more a feeling, a gentle pulse against the stillness. Distant sounds, perhaps the murmur of a stream or the call of an owl, blended into the velvet darkness, becoming part of its texture. The fireflies pulsed with a slower tempo now, their lights fading and brightening in time with a breath, mirroring the quiet rise and fall of the garden itself. The scent of jasmine, heavy and sweet, drifted on the cool air, mingling with the earthy fragrance of damp moss. A thin mist began to rise from the water garden, softening the reflections of the lanterns into hazy glows. Each firefly blink now left a lingering ghost image on the eye, a pale echo in the deepening blue. The sweeping continued its slow arc, disturbing only the smallest dust motes and releasing another whisper of scent from the stone path. A small fish surfaced near the edge of the pond, creating a ripple that spread outwards like a sigh. The velvet darkness felt less like an absence of light and more like a presence, a gentle weight surrounding everything. Coolness settled on the skin, a soothing balm after the warmth of day. The rhythm of the firefly pulses had slowed to match the beat of a resting heart. A single leaf, loosened by the night's stillness, floated downstream with no resistance, carried by an unseen current. The distant murmur seemed closer now, perhaps the rustling of bamboo leaves or the soft splash of water against stone, blending seamlessly into the quietude. The scent of night-blooming jasmine drifted on the cool air, a sweetness barely there, like a remembered dream. Mist began to gather in the hollows between the stones, softening their edges and blurring the lines of the garden path. A faint coolness rose from the damp earth, seeping into the moss that clung to the ancient walls. The firefly pulses were now only glimmers, tiny stars winking open and closed with long pauses in between. Downstream, the single leaf had almost disappeared, a shadow blending with the darker currents. The murmur continued, a gentle susurrus that felt less like sound and more like the garden breathing. A woman swept the stone terrace slowly, her movements deliberate and unhurried, leaving no trace but the smooth surface of the flagstone. Small silver fish stirred beneath the water's surface, accepting flakes of food offered with quiet patience. The velvet darkness deepened, a comforting embrace that held all sounds within its stillness. A single drop of dew clung to a bamboo leaf, reflecting the faint glimmer of a distant firefly like a tiny pearl. The jasmine's fragrance, released by the warmth of the evening, drifted on the air like a soft veil. A thin mist began to rise from the still pond, blurring the edges of the water lilies and softening the stone lanterns. The woman continued her sweeping, each brush a quiet rhythm against the ancient stones, barely disturbing the peace. Silver scales flashed momentarily as another fish rose to accept a tiny offering, then disappeared back into the shadowy depths. The velvet darkness grew heavier now, pooling in the hollows of the garden and silencing even the smallest rustle. The single drop of dew on the bamboo leaf trembled slightly, its pearl-like reflection growing fainter with each passing moment. Beyond the terrace wall, a distant chime sounded once, then was absorbed into the stillness of the night. The mist thickened around the base of the weeping willow, creating an ethereal glow that seemed to emanate from within the tree itself. A few more flakes of food drifted down, dissolving almost instantly in the dark water, leaving no ripple behind. The garden breathed deeply, a slow and gentle expansion and contraction, holding the scent of jasmine and the promise of quiet rest. The mist now curled like slow ribbons around the stone lanterns, softening their sharp edges into gentle blurs. A woman swept the flagstones with a wide brush, her movements as fluid and unhurried as water flowing downhill. Each sweep gathered fallen jasmine petals, releasing another wave of sweetness into the heavy air. The dark water of the koi pond reflected only fragments of the sky, muted and indistinct like old memories. More flakes of food descended, each one a tiny star dissolving into the blackness below, unnoticed by the silent fish. The weeping willow's glow intensified, casting long, pale shadows that danced with the shifting mist. A single firefly blinked briefly near the bamboo grove, its light a fleeting spark in the vast stillness. The scent of jasmine deepened further, clinging to the air like a soft embrace, almost palpable against the skin. The terrace wall seemed to recede into the darkness, becoming less a boundary and more a suggestion of space. A profound quiet settled over everything, a comforting weight that invited letting go and gentle rest. The mist now curled around the stone lanterns, softening their edges until they appeared as gentle mounds rather than distinct forms. A faint coolness rose from the koi pond, carrying with it the subtle scent of water lilies and damp earth. Someone continued to sweep the flagstones, the soft rasp of bristles against stone, a rhythmic pulse in the deepening night. The jasmine fragrance had woven itself into the very fabric of the air, a sweet, heavy presence that seemed to slow time itself. Small silver fish occasionally broke the surface of the pond, their movements creating barely ripples in the still water. Shadows lengthened and pooled beneath the bamboo stalks, obscuring the delicate patterns of light and dark on the grove floor. The weeping willow's glow had become a soft luminescence, illuminating only the immediate space around its cascading branches. A distant chime, perhaps from a temple far away, drifted on the breeze, a single clear note that faded almost as soon as it arrived. Another firefly appeared, then another, their lights blinking in slow, unhurried synchronicity above the mossy garden path. The terrace wall had dissolved completely into the darkness, leaving only the impression of open space and quiet surrender. The mist, now a gentle presence, curled around the stone lanterns, softening their edges and blurring their reflections in the damp earth. A woman swept the terrace with slow, deliberate strokes, her movements mirroring the sway of the bamboo leaves in the unseen breeze. The scent of jasmine deepened, almost palpable, weaving itself into the cool night air like a silver thread. Fireflies continued their silent dance, each pulse of light a tiny beacon in the growing darkness, rising and falling with the rhythm of breathing. Below the willow's luminous branches, koi stirred in the pond, occasionally breaking the surface with a quiet ripple that disturbed the mirrored stars. The single chime returned, fainter still this time, echoing not as a sound but as a vibration felt deep within the bone. Shadows had begun to climb the walls of the small pavilion, embracing the wooden pillars and smoothing away their sharp angles. A bowl of fish food sat beside the pond, slowly emptying as another handful drifted onto the water's surface, attracting shimmering scales. The luminescence from the willow seemed to expand imperceptibly, casting a gentle glow on the mossy stones lining the path. Everything felt suspended, time itself slowing and dissolving into the quiet surrender of the night garden. A peaceful blurring of form and shadow. The mist, now a soft blanket, curled around the stone lanterns, softening their glow to barely visible embers. Each handful of fish food released sent tiny ripples across the pond's surface, momentarily disturbing the perfect reflections of the willow branches. A woman continued sweeping the path with slow, deliberate strokes, the brush whispering against the damp flagstones, without raising up. The scent of jasmine grew heavier still, a sweet and languid perfume that seemed to weave itself into the very fabric of the air. Fireflies blinked into existence amongst the ferns, their lights rising and falling like miniature stars caught in the undergrowth. The luminescence from the willow deepened, painting the mossy stones with shades of pale green and silver. Shadows lengthened further, pooling around the base of the pavilion, blurring the distinction between wood and darkness. Another chime, almost imperceptible now, resonated as a warmth against the skin rather than a sound in the ear. The water lilies remained perfectly still, their white petals unfurling slowly under the gentle light, undisturbed by any breeze. A distant, rhythmic dripping, perhaps from bamboo leaves holding rainwater, added another layer to the garden's quiet symphony of surrender. The mist, now a soft embrace, climbed the stone lanterns, softening their sharp edges into gentle curves. A woman swept the path with slow, deliberate strokes, her movements mirroring the languid descent of the night. The scent of jasmine grew heavier, almost tangible, weaving itself through the air like a silver thread. Fireflies began to appear, tiny sparks drifting amongst the willow branches, their lights blinking in a silent code. Each blink was a miniature echo of the distant stars, reflected faintly on the surface of the pond. The water lilies continued their slow unfolding, revealing deeper layers of pearly white within their petals. A man fed small flakes to the koi, their orange bodies gliding beneath the surface with quiet grace. The rhythmic dripping persisted, a gentle pulse marking the passage of time without urgency. Shadows deepened further still, blending the pavilion's wooden frame seamlessly into the surrounding darkness. Warmth from the luminescence settled on the mossy stones like a comforting weight, inviting complete stillness. The mist, now a soft blanket, clung to the bamboo stalks, blurring their vertical lines. A single lantern cast its glow upon a stone basin filled with rainwater, mirroring the deepening indigo of the sky. Jasmine vines, heavy with blossoms, released their perfume in slow, spiraling waves. Fireflies began to punctuate the darkness. The man continued sweeping the path, his movements deliberate and unhurried against the quiet backdrop of the night. Koi brushed against the water lily's pads, creating barely perceptible ripples that spread outwards in concentric circles. The rhythmic dripping echoed softly from the eaves of the pavilion, a constant reminder of time's gentle flow. Warmth radiated from the luminescence, softening the edges of everything it touched and inviting a sense of weightless calm. Moss-covered stones absorbed the light, holding its glow like secrets whispered in the dark. The garden breathed deeply, surrendering to the stillness of the night, each element finding its quiet place within the whole. The mist, now a soft blanket, clung to the bamboo stalks, blurring their sharp lines into gentle curves. Jasmine's fragrance deepened with each passing moment, weaving itself through the air like a silent melody. Fireflies began to appear, tiny sparks of luminescence drifting and dancing above the pond's surface. A woman slowly swept the stone path, her movements as fluid and unhurried as the falling leaves from autumn long past. The koi continued their quiet exploration, their scales catching fleeting glimpses of the firefly light. Warmth radiated from the luminescence, now a deeper amber hue, painting the moss-covered stones with an even softer glow. Distant chimes resonated faintly, carried on the breeze like whispers from another world. Someone gently fed the fish, small ripples disturbing the perfect reflections of the fireflies in the water. The garden breathed deeply, each leaf and stone surrendering further to the stillness, a quiet acceptance of the night's embrace. Shadows lengthened and softened, blending seamlessly into the mist, creating an atmosphere of profound peace and weightless calm. The amber light now pooled like honey amongst the ferns, outlining their delicate fronds with a gentle warmth. A heavier mist drifted in from beyond the garden walls, softening the edges of everything it touched. The scent of jasmine grew richer, almost palpable, weaving itself into the cool night air. More fireflies appeared, tiny sparks rising and falling like miniature stars mirroring those beginning to show above. Someone continued sweeping the stone path, the soft brush a rhythmic whisper against the aged surface. The water lilies closed their petals slowly, surrendering to the darkness with quiet grace. Small schools of fish circled as food drifted down, creating momentary disturbances in the mirrored firefly light. Shadows stretched long and languid, pooling beneath the branches of the ancient willow tree. Musk. The distant chimes seemed to slow further, each note dissolving into the stillness before it fully formed. A profound sense of weightlessness settled over the garden, a gentle invitation to let go and simply be. The mist, now a soft blanket, clung to the stone lanterns illuminating the path with a diffused glow. More jasmine blossoms released their fragrance, carried on currents so gentle they felt like whispers against the skin. Fireflies pulsed in greater numbers, their lights weaving patterns amongst the willow's drooping branches, resembling fallen stars caught in its leaves. A figure continued to sweep the veranda stones, each movement deliberate and unhurried, disturbing only the dust motes dancing in the light. The pond's surface remained undisturbed except for the slow swirl of fishtails as they accepted the falling nourishment. Shadows deepened beneath the willow, becoming less defined, more like pools of ink blending into the night. The distant chimes resonated with a lower frequency, each tone stretching and thinning until it was almost imperceptible. A small bowl was refilled with fish food, the sound barely audible above the quiet hum of nocturnal insects. Weightlessness deepened, a feeling of suspension as if floating on a calm, dark sea, cradled by the stillness. The firefly light reflected in dewdrops clinging to spiderwebs, transforming them into miniature galaxies suspended between blades of grass. The mist, now a soft embrace, drifted between the stone lanterns, blurring their shapes into gentle glows. A single petal detached from a night-blooming jasmine and spiraled downwards, unseen in the deepening gloom. The weightlessness felt less like floating on water and more like sinking into velvet, a slow descent into quietude. Fireflies pulsed with a rhythm that mirrored the distant, almost forgotten beat of the chimes. Dewdrops swelled on the leaves of the ferns, each holding a tiny, inverted reflection of the star-dusted sky. The sound of sweeping continued, a gentle rustle against the flagstones, barely disturbing the stillness. A faint luminescence began to emanate from the moss itself, a subtle green glow adding another layer to the night's soft light. The bowl for the fish was replenished again, the scattering of food creating ripples that dissolved into nothingness. Shadows no longer felt like absences of light, but rather presences in their own right, cool and comforting. Each blade of grass seemed to hold a miniature universe within its form, illuminated by the firefly's fleeting spark.